My mother-in-law mocked me as just a trophy wife at her anniversary party. My husband Mark and I have been together for nearly 8 years and are quite happy in our marriage. However, there's always been conflict with my husband's parents. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law has always harbored negative feelings towards me since we got engaged. My father-in-law was kind, but he tended to let my mother-in-law dominate and mostly kept to himself. My husband comes from a wealthier background than I do, and my mother-in-law has always used this as a reason to dislike me. She would act as if my middle-class family background was somehow wrong, making comments about my appearance, outfits, or shoes. Initially, I wasn't self-conscious about these things, but her constant comments made me start buying expensive clothes specifically for occasions when I had to see her, hoping to avoid her pitying looks. Once, I wore a white shirt that she had seen me wear a month ago, and she made a comment about me repeating clothes, suggesting that wealthy people don't do this. My husband tried to intervene, but my mother-in-law would knowingly make these comments in front of others to embarrass me. She even insisted on taking me shopping and bought me clothes I didn't like. I accepted them graciously, hoping to build a positive relationship with her. However, things escalated when I got a great job early in our relationship, significantly improving our lifestyle. My mother-in-law was not happy and demanded to know exactly how much I was earning, insisting that women should earn less than their husbands. I pointed out that my job in pharmaceuticals was lucrative and that I might even earn more than Mark in the long run. My mother-in-law then told me I could keep my job for now, but once I married Mark, I would have to quit to avoid family gossip. This outdated view made me laugh, as Mark fully supported my career. I eventually talked to Mark about how uncomfortable his mother's behavior made me feel. Mark was furious when he found out his mother had been contacting me like this. He spoke with her, after which she called me, accusing me of trying to come between her and Mark and calling me names. She even threatened not to let Mark marry someone like me and demanded that I leave him. I ended the call and blocked her number, feeling exhausted by her toxic behavior. It was a significant warning sign. Despite this, Mark and I didn't break up, but I started questioning what kind of mother he had grown up with. Over the years, I couldn't completely avoid mother-in-law because of family events where Mark was invited and I had to go. She would ignore me completely, acting as though I didn't exist. For instance, at Mark's cousin's birthday party, everyone greeted us warmly, but mother-in-law would rush to hug Mark, asking about his day. If Mark tried to involve me, she'd quickly change the subject. I noticed a pattern where she'd often bring up her supposed health issues, telling Mark how old and frail she felt despite being perfectly healthy. It was strange how she manipulated her son for attention. When Mark proposed after years of dating, he invited everyone to our engagement party. While my family was thrilled, Mark's parents weren't as enthusiastic. Mother-in-law arrived with a sour expression, which darkened further when she saw my engagement ring. She criticized Mark for buying me a larger ring than the one father-in-law had given her. Father-in-law tried to calm her down, but mother-in-law continued, implying that her son couldn't do anything right for her, but was overly generous to me. I couldn't tolerate her disrespect, so I firmly told her to leave if she couldn't show respect. Mother-in-law was shocked by my response, but I wasn't going to let her ruin such a joyous occasion in front of my family. Father-in-law escorted her out while she kept calling for Mark, who stood by my side. Later on, my mother-in-law called Mark to apologize, claiming she was drunk, even though we all knew she rarely drank, because she was apologizing to both of us. We decided to let it go. Then came the wedding planning. My mother-in-law insisted on being part of my dress shopping, claiming she had always wanted to do this. By this point, my patience with her was wearing thin, but I couldn't disrespect her outright since she was my fiance's mother. So I reluctantly allowed her to come along, warning my mother and cousin to be prepared for any antics. As expected, my mother-in-law had issues with my dress choices. She criticized my dress as unsophisticated, demanding I wear a more traditional white dress. I stood my ground, and my mother defended me, reminding her that I wasn't her daughter and she should keep her opinions to herself. My mother-in-law sulked in a corner like a toddler, making nasty comments throughout my fitting. In the end, I chose a dress and paid for it. My mother-in-law then had the audacity to tell me she was glad I picked that dress because it made my arms look fat, giggling at her own comment. My patient mother finally snapped and scolded her for her immature behavior. I was close to tears. No one wants to hear hurtful comments about their dream dress, especially when it's untrue. We informed her that she would need to find her own way home since I had driven everyone that day and refused to let her ride with us, knowing she would continue to criticize me. She panicked, but I stood firm. While driving my mother home, Mark called me, upset, asking how I could abandon his mother and that she had called him in tears, accusing me of leaving her on purpose. I promised to explain everything when I got home, but he continued to criticize me. My mother, hearing everything on speakerphone, intervened, listing all of my mother-in-law's behavior throughout the day, asking Mark if this was how respected adults behaved. Mark was embarrassed, realizing he didn't know the full story. Clearly, my mother-in-law hadn't told him everything. Later, when Mark returned home, he apologized again, explaining that he panicked at the thought of his mother being left alone. I reassured him that I wouldn't have done that if his mother hadn't been nasty to me all day. Mark hugged me and offered to uninvite his mother from the wedding if I wanted. But I hesitated because I didn't want to exclude his father, who might not attend if his wife wasn't invited. Before the wedding, we spoke to Mark's father and explained that if Mark's mother's behavior became unacceptable during the wedding, he would need to intervene. Mark's father understood and sympathized with our situation, and I felt sorry for him having to deal with his wife's behavior constantly. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law behaved well during the wedding, boasting to everyone about our grand celebration as if she had paid for it. However, during the wedding toast, Mark's father made it clear that they hadn't contributed financially and praised us for our hard work. He expressed pride in his accomplished daughter-in-law, which irked my mother-in-law. During the father-daughter dance, my dad and I enjoyed a dance, and everyone applauded. Just as Mark was about to join us, my mother-in-law interrupted, insisting on dancing with her son first. Mark obliged, dancing with her. Later at the wedding, my mother-in-law congratulated me, and when she randomly commented that my arms didn't look that fat in my dress, I politely smiled, though it irked me. I didn't want her mean remarks to spoil my special day. Overall, despite some tension, everyone had a good time at the wedding, dancing, and perhaps drinking a bit too much. The next day, I woke up to several messages from my mother-in-law, accusing me of embarrassing her during the wedding celebration and insisting that I needed to do better if I wanted to be part of her family. Despite feeling a bit hungover, I recalled the events of the night clearly and knew I hadn't done anything embarrassing. I even called my parents to confirm, and they assured me everything was fine and everyone had enjoyed themselves. When my husband woke up, I showed him the messages, and he advised me to ignore them. Feeling suspicious, I pressed him to explain what my mother-in-law meant. That's when Mark revealed that throughout the night, she had been coming to him, commenting on how I was having too much fun, especially when dancing with my cousins. She even suggested jokingly that I was like a wild horse, and that Mark needed to control me now that we were married. Mark dismissed her remarks at the time and urged me to do the same. But I was deeply offended by her insinuations about my behavior at my own wedding. I wanted to confront her immediately, but Mark and I were leaving for our honeymoon, so I decided to set aside my feelings for the time being. Our honeymoon was wonderful, and we had a great time together. Upon returning from our honeymoon, my mother-in-law called me, sweetly inquiring about how the trip went, unusual since she rarely reached out to me. I took the opportunity to express my displeasure about her comments to Mark on our wedding night. She quickly dismissed it, claiming she meant no harm, and then proceeded to pry for details about our honeymoon, asking if we had plenty of alone time. I asked her directly to be honest with me and told her that I didn't think our honeymoon details were any of her business. When my mother-in-law persisted, claiming she just wanted to know if she would be a grandmother soon, I was taken aback for several reasons. First, we had just gotten married. It hadn't even been a week, and she already expected me to start having children to fulfill her dream of becoming a grandmother. Second, both Mark and I had always been clear that we didn't want kids. This was a decision we had made long before we got serious with each other, and our stance hadn't changed. We had never explicitly told our parents about our decision because we considered it our private matter. As my mother-in-law continued to push, insisting that I needed to get pregnant quickly because my biological clock was ticking and these were my best years for having a baby, I cringed inwardly. Then she crossed a serious boundary by suggesting that Mark and I should stop using condoms, an incredibly inappropriate thing for her to say. I shut her down immediately, ending the conversation. When I told Mark about it, he was furious. He called his mother to confront her and honestly admitted that we didn't want children. As expected, my mother-in-law reacted explosively, screaming and hurling insults over the phone. She threatened that if we didn't give her a grandchild, she wouldn't leave us anything in her will. Mark calmly informed her that she had no assets of her own due to a prenuptial agreement with his father, so her threats were empty. My mother-in-law then turned her anger towards me, blaming me for not fulfilling my duty as a woman to give my husband a child. She used hurtful language, calling me faulty. Mark intervened, telling her to stop, but she continued her tirade, accusing us of destroying her dreams and questioning why we even got married if we didn't want children. Finally, Mark put his foot down and firmly told his mother that he was done with her behavior. He made it clear that she couldn't speak to me that way anymore. After Mark confronted his mother and made it clear that he was cutting her off due to her ongoing disrespect towards me, we stayed true to our decision and severed all contact with her. Mark's father did try to intervene initially, but after hearing our side of the story, he supported our choice. Over the years, my parents and Mark's father have maintained a relationship, but we never invited my mother-in-law into our lives or home. Fortunately, she respected our boundaries. In December of last year, we found out I was pregnant unexpectedly. Despite our initial feelings about not wanting children, we decided to go along with it since we were in a good place in our lives. When the news spread, everyone congratulated us, and my mother-in-law sent flowers and a letter of apology. She claimed to have reflected on her behavior and changed after undergoing therapy. However, I was skeptical of her supposed transformation and chose not to respond to her. Just 2 months into my pregnancy, I experienced a miscarriage. It was a devastating experience for us because, despite not planning for a child, we had already developed love and hopes for our baby. I was overwhelmed with grief and didn't know how to cope. Mark and my parents were incredibly supportive, staying by my side throughout this difficult time. My mother stayed with us for days because she understood how difficult it was for me to even get out of bed. Slowly, with Mark's unwavering support, I began to heal and process my emotions. Recently, Mark's father invited us to his and my mother-in-law's 25th wedding anniversary. It was a significant event for the family, and everyone was invited. However, Mark and I decided not to attend because we knew the topic of our miscarriage would likely come up, and it would be too painful to revisit that day and explain our grief to everyone again. Father-in-law pleaded with us to attend his and mother-in-law's 25th wedding anniversary celebration, urging us to take a night off for ourselves and relax. Reluctantly, we agreed, knowing it would be the first time seeing my mother-in-law after cutting ties with her for years. However, I was already struggling with my own grief and didn't have the energy to dwell on her or her behavior. When we arrived, my mother-in-law warmly greeted Mark with a hug, but was noticeably cold towards me. I brushed it off and found a seat, letting Mark catch up with his mother. During dinner, conversation naturally revolved around people sharing their good news and life updates. Mark's cousin announced her pregnancy, which was difficult for me to hear. As everyone congratulated her, my mother-in-law unexpectedly stood up with a microphone to give a toast. She expressed happiness about being surrounded by loved ones and then congratulated Mark's cousin on her pregnancy. However, her tone shifted dramatically when she directed hurtful accusations towards me. She insinuated that I had done something to cause my miscarriage, claiming it couldn't have been a simple natural event. Mark and I were stunned and frozen by her cruelty. Mother-in-law continued, loudly stating that her son had settled for someone like me and that she had hoped our marriage would bring her grandchildren. She declared me nothing more than a trophy wife and openly expressed her anticipation for Mark to divorce me so she wouldn't have to see me at her next anniversary party. She then cheered and drank as if she had given a triumphant speech, leaving the entire room in shocked silence. As Mark confronted his mother about her behavior, their conversation escalated into a heated argument. She continued to blame me while Mark tried to defend me, pointing out how ridiculous she was being. I felt overwhelmed with shame and embarrassment, and tears streamed down my face. It was all too much to handle, and I was flooded with emotions. Mother-in-law mocked my tears, dismissing them as an act because no one would believe my sob story anyway. Suddenly, Mark's father, who had been silently observing, stood up and called for everyone to calm down. He announced that he needed to speak his mind and revealed that he had endured suffering for 25 years of marriage. That night had opened his eyes. and he declared that he was done with it all. Update 1. I never expected my original post to gain so much attention. It's been eye-opening to hear from so many people who have shared their own stories of dealing with toxic mothers-in-law. It's truly baffling why a parent would behave that way towards their child's partner. I want to clarify something. Please don't criticize my husband. He's done his best to stand up for me whenever possible. Dealing with an overbearing, controlling, and toxic parent is incredibly challenging. I was fortunate to have loving parents, but my husband didn't have the same experience. He grew up thinking his mother's behavior was normal and has been protective of me in his own way. I also want to express my gratitude to everyone who shared their experiences with miscarriage. I'm genuinely sorry for all those who have gone through this heartbreaking loss. I've been struggling with feelings of guilt, even though I know it wasn't my fault. I realize now that seeking help from a therapist is important, and I plan to do so. I'm also looking into joining forums where other moms who have experienced miscarriage can offer support and understanding. Feeling seen and understood by others who have been through similar situations will be invaluable to me. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and my father-in-law has officially served divorce papers to my mother-in-law. He's been staying with us during this time, and he's actually a wonderful house guest. I can see where my husband gets his sense of humor from. Father-in-law also enjoys cooking, so sometimes he has dinner ready when I come back from work. Mark was truly fortunate to have him, and I can't understand why my mother-in-law would let go of such a gem like him. When Mark and his father went to serve her the divorce papers, she refused to even look at them. Mark told me that she yelled at them, claiming they had no right to cut her off. She justified her hurtful comments about me by saying she only wanted good things for our family. Mark chose to ignore her outbursts and helped his father pack his things. Mother-in-law's anger escalated as she started throwing things and yelling. Father-in-law threatened to involve the police because technically it was his house. Hearing this, she quieted down, realizing she had nowhere else to go. After the party, no one reached out to her except to criticize her behavior. Everyone understood that her accusations against me being a trophy wife were false, especially considering my successful career. They also empathized with my pain from the miscarriage. Mother-in-law's own actions left her with no family or friends left to support her. She's tried to beg father-in-law to reconcile, but he's made it clear he wants nothing to do with her. My parents spoke to mother-in-law after learning what she did to me. They warned her that they would take legal action against her for harassing and defaming me publicly. My mom isn't one to stay quiet, and she told her exactly what she thought. Knowing my parents, I trust they'll follow through on their words and take her to court if necessary. For my sake, I hope she stays away from me. Last update. It's been 8 months since my last update, and I want to thank everyone who has supported me through this journey. Father-in-law is now officially divorced and free from my mother-in-law. They had a prenuptial agreement, so she couldn't take anything that wasn't rightfully hers. Father-in-law agreed to let her keep their joint account and the car, but when she demanded the house, he and his lawyer dismissed her request because the house belonged to him before they were married. Mark heard that she's currently staying with one of his cousins while she looks for a new place to live. She has more than enough money to support herself comfortably. Mother-in-law has mostly stayed away from us, although we hear she tries to reach out to others with her version of events to gain sympathy. As far as we're concerned, she can do whatever she wants. Mark and I are doing really well. I followed through with therapy, and it's helped me connect with new friends who understand me. Mark has also started therapy to work through his own past issues. Our careers are on track, and we're grateful for everything we have right now.